everybody. Just writing something down as we go. Happy it's a Royal Knockout Day, and welcome to this Royal News Agenda special with me, Fleet Street Fox. And today I'm joined by the Mirror's Royal correspondent, Russell Myers. Good morning, Russell.
Good morning, Susie.
You may bow. This is the People's Paper Review, so get into the comments, ask us your questions. Those of you listening later on podcast will just have to work out how to curtsy instead. As you will see, Prince Harry has joined us. He's keeping a careful eye. So, Russell, behave yourself. So what have we got for you today? Now, the Mirror has splashed on the nurses' strike today and the fact the government's paying billions to agency staff to cross the lines while refusing the pay rise. Rather complicated fact by the fact it's often the same nurses. But we don't want to talk to you about that. Today, we have a special investigation into the depths of Prince Harry's book, Spare, and all the bits you haven't been told or learned about in the extensive coverage. Now, it's had. Now, whether you've been ignoring it or not, you have almost certainly got an opinion about it. So let's base some of those opinions on some facts. We have with us today Russell, who has read both the Spanish translation and most of the English one he's catching up with, so he should know what he's talking about. Here's my copy, full of notes. Look at that. Actually been paid.
Mine, yeah. Well, one would hope anyway, Susie.
We haven't got the post-its, obviously. And there is another follow-up about the book today on page 13. There's a former glamour model, Nicola McLean, reveals all about a wild night on tequila shots she had with Harry. More on that a bit later. But first, Russell, you've been writing about, talking about, investigating this guy, his family for years. Was there anything, what was the most surprising bit of this book to you?
Well, where to start? I mean, I think I've had £1 for every time over the last year or so that somebody said, well, how much more is there left to say? Then we probably wouldn't be sitting here because we'd be like, sitting on a gold mine, because what have we had? We've had the Oprah Winfrey interview. We've had several US TV interviews, the Netflix series, which was over 6 hours that I had to watch. So you didn't have to.
You seem really happy about your job.
But then we have the book and lots of rumors about whether it was sort of some rewrites after the Queen had died. It was supposed to come out in November. That got postponed till December, and then January the 10th, it dropped. And it did not disappoint at all. Well, probably for the royal family, but not for us journalists and royal watchers, because it was absolutely explosive. Bombshell after bombshell. Very surprised that, the targeted attacks on not only Prince William, but the King. I mean, Camilla came in for an absolute bruising. She got called a wicked stepmother, talked about her path to the crown, how she sort of dismissed the boys who had begged their father not to marry her. It goes on and on. I mean, Kate, who we all think is sweetness and light, turning her nose up at Meghan, asking to borrow lipstick, and not being too friendly when she joined the royal fold. So I think there was something for everybody inside the book. And then we haven't even mentioned Prince Harry's nether regions, have we? Because they were mentioned more than a few times.
Yeah, probably far more than we'd get, for example, in Prince Andrew's book, if he ever wrote one. Now, Mike says, can we have a Republican special next week? Every day is a Republican special.
So, yeah, we need to get Kevin on. I mean, Kevin Maguire, our resident Republican. I actually did a Facebook Live with him, actually, and we sort of battled it out. Not that I'm a huge monarchist, just doing the job, as it were, but Kevin definitely nails his colours to the mast, and it's maybe we should have him on again. It was quite a good fun.
Yes, when we get a royal story and Kevin's on the news agenda, he's always quite good fun. It's always very enjoyable. Now, get into the comments, everybody. Ask us your questions. Have you read the book? Have you refused to read the book? What is your opinion based on whether or not you have read the book or read the Mirror's coverage or someone else's? And what do you think about the fact he's even written it at all? Was there anything in it which surprised you, or is all of it, as Kevin Maguire would say, well, of course they're dysfunctional. Now, while it's been reported that Charles calls his son darling boy and he's a bit of a useless dad, there's a few things not been mentioned that I haven't seen anywhere else. And one of them is that Harry blew up his dad. He exploded his father. Now, listen to this. While he was training to go to Afghan as a forward air controller the first time, he was based at Sandringham and he was talking in planes to come and bomb a pretend target and, say, oh, we bombed it and fly off again. And at some point when he realized he was there, his father popped down to see him and said, "Hello, how's it going?" And Harry said, "It's great, but I'm working." And so Charles said, "Oh, sorry, bothering you," and drove off again. And then this happened. He drove off. As he went down the track, I told the Typhoon, new target, grey Audi, headed southeast from my position down track towards a big silver barn oriented east-west. The Typhoon tracked par, did a low pass straight over him, almost shattering the windows of his Audi, but ultimately spared him on my orders. Now, that's sort of quite funny. If I had a Typhoon, I might well try and bomb someone with it and give them the sort of the heads up. But their relationship, Russell, it's a really strange one that comes out of the book. You know, he's one of the standout bits is the huge number, a revolving number of sort of alpha male father figures that come through his life. The equerries, some of the staff, his bodyguards, his CO, some of his commanding officers in Afghanistan, for example, these ex-military types, cool, ruthless leaders of men, you know, what you'd want out of a king, really, say, in history. He just doesn't have that relationship with his dad, does he? Is that part of the problem, do you think?
Yes, I think so. And that passage you just read, I think a psychologist would have a field day with it, because there are these sort of layers that are spattered around the book, talking about his relationship with his father and how, I mean, Charles almost becomes this forlorn figure who has failed Harry and at every juncture within his life, talking about that when he finally went to him. Well, first of all, it talked about when he came in and told him Diana had passed away. His mother had tragically died in the car accident in Paris. And he just sat at the end of the bed, didn't hug him, didn't cry, just sort of said, she patted his knee and said that she didn't make it. And that was it. He just left the room, and Harry, it paints his picture as though he was just left to get on with it. And at certain times, his brother was there for him, and then their relationship completely soured and is in the state that it is now. But in terms of Charles comes across as quite a sad character, and I don't think from knowing and working with him for many years that is the full picture, because I do think he might not be the archetypal of a father going to watch their son playing football or rugby at the weekend and cheering them on. But there is a sensitive side to him, and I just think that Harry is, as is well demonstrated throughout the book, he has an awful lot of issues, and I mean, his father is right. One with the father is right at the top of the tree, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's sad. I mean, he really loves his dad. He's very understanding, it would appear, about the fact find it so difficult to express his emotions. He knows that it's there. He loves his gran, and she's got the same kind of issue. He's never hugged her. There's one bit where he's talking about the Golden Jubilee and he wants to reach out and hug her because she's having fun, and he daren't because no one ever has. You know,
well, he talked previously, I think it was in the Oprah Winfrey interview, about this genetic pain and how basically his father said to him, well, I had to go through it, so you're going to have to go through it. And that was about not only his life, in his upbringing, his livelihood, what it meant to be a royal, but also when you have a partner coming onto the scene as well. And that's what he articulated in the book about how he tried to explain how it was to Meghan, but obviously didn't do a very good job, because they didn't last very long. But you get it. I mean, as you mentioned, that Kevin would have probably said, well, of course they're dysfunctional, and I think that everybody would have known that, especially after Christmas. We've already been with our own families, haven't we? But the level of how dysfunctional they are is quite off the scale. And I think probably, I mean, Meghan had said herself that she thought it would be a royal family. She said this in the Netflix series, royal family, you know, front facing, out and about, but behind closed doors, it would be a normal family. And I think demonstrated within this book, and everything we've known over the last year or so demonstrates that it pretty much isn't.
No, exactly. And of course, we can't forget, Prince Charles wrote his own book back in the 90s, or cooperated with a biography of him, in which a lot of this stuff was said, that his parents didn't really give him any emotional support, that he was raised in a very cold and emotionless way. So perhaps that's why Harry is fairly understanding that that is how Charles is, but is seeking it somewhere else, you know, from all these manly men who'd take him off to Africa and Afghanistan and places like this. And he knows he's not getting that from his dad. And perhaps why we're so a bit more understanding about Charles being a fairly poor father, because it's not really his fault. It seems to have been
Yeah, I suppose that's where Harry comes in. He wants to try and break the chain, doesn't he? And he even talks about in the interviews that he gave recently that he wants to help his brother's children. You can imagine how much that has angered William, because, as he said in one of the print interviews the other day, well, my brother's basically told me to keep my nose out, and why wouldn't he? I mean, he's already trashed him and his family in this book. Then I think one of the red lines that Harry has definitely crossed is commenting on William and Kate's children, and that certainly won't go anywhere to repairing these relationships. But I mean, it's, as I said, it's bombs all over the place. It'll be very interesting to see what happens going forward, because Harry has basically thrown his family out in the bin, but while also saying that he wants to reconcile with them, and then by saying, but people in Africa brought him up. There was nannies, there was other people in the army who helped him, and his family weren't there for him. So I think it will be quite hard for them to bring him back into the fold.
Yeah. Now, Missy Moo says, I hadn't heard about Lippygate before the book. It was shocking snobbery where Kate didn't want Meghan to borrow her lip gloss, or the fact that she put it on her lip and on her finger and then rubbed it on her lips. I mean,
is that a thing? I'm pretty sure I've borrowed people's lip gloss, so it's a bit frosty outside. I mean, well, maybe not the lip gloss, maybe
I think lip salve is what you're talking about there.
Yeah, but
what new revelation coming out in your
you got an exclusive. But I mean, is this a big deal? I mean, Kate comes across as quite snobby and uptight in several instances in the book, and I think that was one of them. There's another one where almost William and Kate had summoned Meghan and Harry over to their grand 20-bedroom apartment at Kensington Palace, and they're sort of sitting on two throne chairs like Peter and Katie at the other end of the room, and they're just sitting on a couch being admonished. It's it all becomes a little bit, the hierarchy all plays out, and you can understand why Harry.
Let's try and be a bit honest, because William, while Harry has been raised as the spare his whole life, like literally your purpose is to be a kidney or some stem cells if necessary, William's been raised to be the heir. And so when he does have his own family home in Kensington Palace, and Harry says, well, it looks like a museum, it's full of all this stuff, and he's probably got he's going to have a sense of his own grandeur, isn't he? Because he's been treated like that his whole life. William has.
Well, very much so. And yes. I mean, Harry was coming in for a bit of stick, living in Nottingham Cottage, and it's a small cottage. It might be on the Kensington Palace estate, but you can understand he wasn't being given the freedom to do what he wanted to do. You can understand him coming from the issue of like, well, where do I fit in this? I'm kind of working for the family business, but I'm not even getting a shareholding within it. So, but then there would have been a better way, I think. I mean, indeed, they did end up moving to Windsor. They had sort of the run of it out there. They weren't being bothered at all, and yet it still wasn't enough for them. So there's definitely some issues all over the place with the family as well, isn't there?
Yeah. Now, Ian says, Harry seems to be trying to run away from the royals, but I don't agree with all his slating and dropping stuff. That's damaging the crown. It strikes me, Ian, that what we've got here is a Princess Di for the social media age, as I think someone put it on Twitter the other day. He's not doing anything particularly different to the kind of stuff his mum said. She would have said in 92 rather, that she just wanted to break some of the problems that the family had and wanted to make it better for her sons and for the children and that going forward and all the rest of it, and that we needed to talk about these things and be more emotional. This is where we are. Diana is his mother and Harry is very much her son, isn't he? Now, keep asking your questions, everybody. Get into the comments and let us know what you think. Is Harry and is the royal family healthy? Is it actually a family? Because there's a lot of stuff there when Harry says he wants to reconcile with his family. And the first thing that occurred to me is, mate, you haven't got one. You don't have a normal family. You don't have a mum and a dad, precisely because it's not a mum, but you don't even have a brother. You have or a grandmother. You have just a line of succession that people are shuffling up and down to get further away from Uncle Andrew most of the time. But they're always competing, and there's this hierarchy. It's one of the things he talks about and that he just can't stand. So I don't know if he's got a family he wants that perfect alpha male dad and a perfect, alpha male older brother kind of thing, and they all have a nice role together. I can't see. That's not these people, really.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason they call it the firm, isn't there? Because it's a family business, and it's very, very separate from family. And if you've watched Succession over the last couple of years, it's very, very much like that. There's a matriarch, patriarch at the top who pretty much is running the show, and then all the other people are vying for the attention. I mean, that's what Harry was talking about. I don't know whether I buy into this completely, but he's saying that the royals always vying to be on the front pages, always vying for the attention, to have their charities and their engagements more publicly known. It's kind of, a little bit of squabbling, but as you say, it's dysfunctional. It doesn't really fit into the normal family mode, and everybody else seems to get on with it. They end up being a bit damaged down the line, and you can understand why Harry was saying it doesn't need to be like this. However, there are more people that think, well, it does need to be like this. It's been going on for over 1,000 years, and that's the way it is, old boy. And you either put up or you shut up, don't you? And therefore,
exactly. There's a bit of that.
I mean, he's gone about it a way that a lot of people don't agree with, but I don't think we've heard the last of it at all.
No, of course not. We'll get onto that at the end. Don't skip ahead, Russell. We've had a few things like the monarchy does, slow and steady on this particular broadcast. So, and one of the things that is talked about in here, just on that point about the royals quibbling with each other, is that they're vying as to who gets how much in the court circular and who is seen to do the most engagements. But how many engagements they can do depends on how much money they get out of the top. So William and Harry are relying on their father to fund their engagements, but yet rather than we get accused of being lazy or something, or not doing enough work because their number of engagements might have dropped. But that's dependent on their father, not them. And they can't do stuff that isn't approved of. And the rest of the family, it's dependent on the monarch. So, it's a bit like they're vying to get in the court circular and look like they're doing the most engagements, because actually what they're trying to do is they're pitching, aren't they, for more money the next year, like any business or any employee. You're coming up to personnel review time and you're going, well, I need more money to do it for my budget, for my job, to go and do this thing over here. They want to prove they're effective. And that's not a family. This man doesn't have a normal family. He's in a business. He's in an enterprise. Well, it is an institution, isn't it? But
well, it is. I mean, just and on that point, the squabbling even becomes so ludicrous that it's definitely like a business, but even some sort of alternate reality, because they're discussing about what their engagement should be over the next year. Harry's talking about the fact that he wants to do something in Africa, and apparently, according to Harry, William snaps, Africa's mine, you've got veterans. I mean, on what planet is that a normal conversation?
Yeah.
But that is the hierarchy. You can't do things that the bosses are doing, whether that's the late Queen, Charles, or William. And I think that definitely Harry and Meghan had those issues, that they were wanting to do parts of the job, as it were, but other members of the royal family already had their fingers in those pies, so they couldn't get involved. And this tells you how dysfunctional it is. And there isn't a set program, even though it's been going for centuries and centuries. Those are the big problems.
It's very much what you can fight for, isn't it? Now, Fred says, is Charles Spencer not a father figure for Harry? He references in the book, the funeral wallop, I suppose, the speech that Charles Spencer gave at Diana's funeral, but he doesn't really talk about him much after that. So it would appear probably not, Fred. Now, keep getting into the comments. Ask us your questions. What do you think about how the royals are organised as an institution? Is it a fair institution? Is it one of those ones that we used to lock people up in with padded rooms? And perhaps we ought to just let the doors open now and let them have their freedom. Now, we've been through Prince Charles and the father figures. We've had a little discussion of the hierarchy, but it's been reported, one of the things that was mentioned, Russell, was that Harry wasn't really William's best man, and that was, quote, a barefaced lie. But in the book, there's a bit more detail on it. So listen to this. Will's best men were just two civilians, two innocents. Had they been outed, the rabid press would have chased them, tracked them, hacked them, investigated them, ruined their families' lives. Both chaps were shy and quiet. They couldn't handle the onslaught and couldn't be expected to. Willie explained all this to me and I didn't blink. I understood. We even had a laugh about it, speculating about the inappropriate things I might have said in my speech. Now, he then goes on to say that he did make a bit of a speech, and what was in it, he did some of the telegrams and stuff like that, which you normally expect the best man to do, and then these other two. gave a talk at Will's wedding. But the fact that was kind of all reported as, I wasn't best man, my brother lied, when the truth, the deeper context is a bit that, well, there were some others who didn't deserve that attention, and so I completely understood that wasn't really my role. That's the kind of minutiae which isn't terribly hurtful or bad or damaging to anyone or anything, but it does get a bit misrepresented. And that's the kind of tiny thing that Harry obsesses about, and it sends him round the twist, doesn't it? So how does that happen? How do we get from the point in the book where he's saying, I understand I wasn't best man, to it being widely reported all around the world, my brother told a barefaced lie?
Well, it's the language used. I think that as you hit the nail on the head, it's Harry's obsessive nature, whether it's his family, whether it's being told no, the press, his mother. I mean, it's completely layered within the book. Now, the issue I had with this, because as you perfectly explained, if he just told that story, everybody could understand it. I mean, the press would come in for a bit of a kick in. I don't think everybody would have been camping outside the two best men's homes. It was a very, very different world, even back in 2011. But that's just the way it was. He tells the story about William explaining to him, this is the way it's got to be, old boy. Sure, you understand. But then to use the language of a barefaced lie makes it very, very aggressive. And I think that, again, his relationship, which is in the gutter with his brother, just sort of rails through once again, using this example.
I mean, he might well be talking about a lie, say, by his brother's office rather than his brother. But, you know, the fact that this family communicate through their offices, really not necessarily. They don't pick up the phone to each other. They don't seem to. I think only Harry and Wills appear to text, some of the younger generations, but the older ones, it's all very much talk to father's office and get a phone call placed later on today sort of thing. Now, you did mention some other things, and Wills does come in for a bit of a pasting in the book, as we all know, but there does seem to be a bit of a good reason for it. Once or twice. For example, when Harry, as you said, Russell, starts wanting to talk about environmentalism, having just already set up the Invictus Games, which were very successful, he decides he wants to do something about environmentalism and damage to things in Africa. He goes out with some friends in Botswana, he saves rhino from poachers and things like this. But, you know, Wills is quoted as saying, you can't, is furious. He doesn't want Harry to do anything in Africa at all, in terms of like a public, you know, have an issue in Africa. If you like, he can visit it, he can go there, that's allowed, but he's not allowed to talk about it. He says, rhinos, elephants, that's mine. I let you have veterans. Why can't you let me have African elephants and rhinos? Now, I can just imagine the stamped foot that probably accompanied that. Aside from the childishness and the tantrum that involves, both these men have got problems, haven't they? They're both grown-ups and they're behaving like this. What's your analysis of that, Russell? Harry's had too much therapy and William hasn't had enough?
Well, I mean, listen, I'm not a psychologist, but it does seem that, as I said, that Harry's obsessive nature on so many categories and issues throughout the book, I found quite troubling. I found that his whole obsession with the press, we saw that interestingly in the TV interviews he gave. I mean, even Tom Bradby at ITV was talking to him about, do you not accept that the third in line to the throne, or whatever you were there, taking Class A drugs is not a matter of public interest? And without breaking stride, he just says, well, what is a matter of public interest is the relationship between the institution and the press. And I think that sort of goes right through the book, right through his being almost. He's completely and utterly obsessed. Has he had too much therapy? I couldn't comment, but it does seem that he gets a lot of things jumbled up. He talks about having an awful lot of therapy throughout his life. Listen, I think that all the family are dysfunctional in the extreme, and they just don't help each other. And whether that's to working with their African elephants or with veterans, it all spills out into this awful mishmash of trying to have a normal relationship when it's anything but, isn't it?
And let's talk about this drug stuff for a minute. Now he's talked about, and to be fair, science is investigating and has found some good links and evidence to say that sort of some psychedelic drugs can help some mental conditions, some mental illnesses, particularly depression, things like that. And they're talking about finding ways to put it into a pill. So you, not the kind of pill you get in the pub, proper pill you get from the chemist, so that you can actually have some of the benefits of, you know, calming down bits of your brain with some narcotics. But as he says in the book, he's taken cocaine at Eton. He's had a lot of weed in his life. He's had psychedelics. He's had mushrooms in Courtney Cox's house. He's had ayahuasca, the sort of South American native psychedelic. And he doesn't seem to have plugged anywhere that these are crimes. Number one. And he's third in line to the throne, which is the point Tom Bradby was making. You know, if you were speeding in your car, if you were, as Harry has been accused of before now, I think, or investigated for, shooting the wrong kind of protected bird on your mother's estate, grandmother's estate in Sandringham, anything like that, it's a crime. And it's not good. Whether you agree that these drugs should be criminal or not, they are criminal at present. And if he's taking them and talking about the benefits of taking them, there is a huge public health discussion, debate, issue about that. He doesn't seem to have noticed that maybe drugs are bad sometimes for some people.
Well, the issue is he's not a public health official either. I mean, whether he's speaking about taking magic mushroom psychedelics and the benefits, I mean, there's many medical papers that have been written on that, but Harry certainly isn't an authority on the subject. And again, I think a lot what people will find within his interviews and within this book is the privilege that seeps through every facet of his life, whether it's him talking about being on the going to Eton or the States, or basically never really having a proper job and having to worry about money like the rest of us, but also talking about, you know, booking first-class flights for Meghan's mum and this, that, and the other. I just think that he's on a different planet in terms of trying to make himself accessible to the people, and yet talking about wanting a normal family. I mean, maybe he will get some sense of that with living apart from them, but he's still living in a $40 million mansion in Montecito, and has been paid an awful lot of money to just completely trash his family. And I think that a lot of people will find that quite unsavory.
Yeah, there does seem to be a lot of negativity about it from people in general, in the same way we didn't quite see with Diana's book, which wasn't wildly different. Now, Pamela says, wouldn't you be unhappy if you'd lived his life? Calling it obsessing when it comes to the press is a bit rich, given the headlines from tabloids. Obviously, Pamela, the media obsess about them too, yes. And we've got to try and remember the royal family has been in existence for 1,000 years. The entire population's been obsessed about them because they have had, for most of that time, what happened with the royal family, who they married, had a massive political impact on all our lives, and whether we went to war and whether dad died and all the rest of it. And now it seems to be that it's our national soap opera. The 300 years or so that the press have been going, they've been part of that as well. But the press is made up of normal human beings like me and Russell. We are as interested in it as anybody else is, or disinterested in Russell's case, perhaps. And we are, you know, we're able to talk about it and have opinions, same as everybody else. And I think if you went to a pub and said, Prince Harry, anybody, you'd have 1,000 opinions straight away. And that's not because of the press. If you got rid of every journalist tomorrow, right, there was none of them left, no newspapers, no TV, none of this anymore, he would still get packed.
Well, yeah, and one of the things is, I mean, look at this book. It's been the fastest selling non-fiction book ever. It's the fastest selling, biggest selling memoir in its first week. I mean, it's probably done about 2 million copies now. 750,000 of those are in the UK, literally just in its first week. So people are very, very interested. And whether that's what Harry has to say, I mean, Netflix have paid them an awful lot of money. It's been, 100 million, talking about 30 odd million for a 3-book deal. People are very, very interested. And I think what the issue is, which I find difficult, is when Harry and Meghan really confuse the two worlds of the media and social media and the people that are obsessing about them in very, very different ways. Of course, he's grown up in this awful goldfish bowl. Could you even imagine living within it? And no wonder he's left it, given the examples that he gives about his family. But certainly I think that there's a lot of convenient truths for Harry that a lot of the time he gets wrong
Yeah. Now,
certainly mistaken about a lot of things.
Yeah, Legal Eagle says here, why are you assuming Harry's words are truthful? Why are you believing him against William simply because he has published them? And why do you believe his narrative about William's wedding? There's a few things going on here, Legal. First off, I don't think it's a case of believing his words are truthful. There has been quite a lot of analysis of the book so far in the fact and putting out the things that aren't right, the things that he misremembers or gets wrong. For example, there's one section where he says that Meghan went to the local supermarket in Kensington and came home and collapsed because she's seen this rack of newspapers that all had her name on the front and people were getting their phones out and taking pictures of her. It didn't happen. She wasn't on the front on that day when we all know she was there and we can prove it. So there's and those newspapers weren't next to the tills, all this stuff. There's things that are wrong. But he does also say in the book that he's got a huge problem with his memory. And this is one of the things. He says that he's got a problem with his memory, perhaps linked to his mother's death and the problems with that, because amnesia can be part of grief. And he said, I just can't recall stuff. My memories, memory involves feeling and I don't want to feel. So I just can't remember some things. And what he does remember is obviously a bit up in here. And as for when you're believing him against someone else or putting his words because he's published them, it's the same with Diana in a way. If someone publishes it, you go, well, is this true? And if someone else doesn't answer that question, then you're kind of left with the view that it is. And this is the problem that the royal family's got at the moment, isn't it, Russell? That if they're not talking about the book, then the book, true or not, becomes the accepted narrative. It becomes part of history, because that's the only thing people can reference. And so whatever Legal Eagle says there about whether or not it's right, or the fact that Harry admits his memory is faulty, that becomes what we all think of as well. Remember when you said this, it was a barefaced lie, it was this, it was that, it was the other. You're welcome, Legal.
Well, again, I think you talk about a dignified silence. Some people would say that the royal family have played the wrong card there, because, I mean, they've all come in for such a bruising. One would have expected them to respond. But I suppose it was very different to the Oprah Winfrey interview, where you had allegations of racism within the royal family, which incidentally, Harry and Meghan have said that they weren't accusing the royal family of being racist, but that's another matter. Then you had the issues of Meghan feeling suicidal, very, very pointed references to their time within the royal family. The Queen then ended up making that unprecedented statement, recollections may vary, whereas this book is just so many explosive allegations and accusations within it. There's too much to respond to. And we've heard Harry talking about the briefing and the leaking and the planting of stories. Well, one, I can tell you that never, ever happened to myself or to my knowledge colleagues, but also it hasn't happened now. Absolutely. Buckingham Palace, Kensington Palace have shut up shop. They haven't said anything. They're allowing this to just play through, hoping it will end up going away because we're moving towards getting back to work. All the focus is going to be on the King's coronation. But of course, it's one narrative. And I think that because Harry's spoken so much, people are understanding that it's definitely one side of the story, or his truth, as Oprah Winfrey would say.
Yeah, and we've got to bear in mind, I think Prince Andrew might have some more issues later this year with the gagging order on Virginia Giuffre coming to an end. So perhaps the palace is assuming that another royal will take over some of the work that Harry's been doing. Now, Cheryl Lee says, Harry's doing drugs. I don't like drugs, but for a royal to say he's done them and come out and say he has, respect him for telling people his story. I'm loving his book. One of the things I've got a problem with this book, Cheryl Lee, one of the things, I don't like drugs either. And I've as a journalist, as a news reporter, I've sat through countless inquests where someone's just weed, someone's just smoked far too much of it and they've become psychotic. And that may not have happened if they hadn't smoked all the weed to start with. And then they go out and run under a bus and they die. And there's terrible tragedies and things like this. I've sat in drug dens. I've spoken to heroin addicts. I've been in places that are just littered with needles, and people who take a lot of drugs over a long period of time are going to have problems with their emotions. They're going to have problems with their ability to tell the truth. And as a journalist, when you're trying to interview a drug addict, oh my God, it's difficult because you're trying to pin it down. And Harry doesn't reference or think or talk about any of that. He doesn't say, perhaps the problems with my memory aren't just linked to my mother's death. Perhaps it's the fact I've taken so much stuff, my brain has been rewired a bit. But he doesn't talk about the fact that, he's been to how many rehab units, and he knew he was drinking too much once or twice, but he kept on drinking. he still can drink quite a lot, and he's probably still having the occasional joint and stuff like this. Now, I think in the whole book there's one mention of a seatbelt. A seatbelt, which you'd have thought would make a big difference to him in his life, and they would campaign about seatbelt wearing, these brothers, but no, they don't. It's just one mention. There's lots of mentions of the paps, of course, in the press. One mention of a seatbelt. And he's just not talking about the stuff that you'd think as a normal human being that you would go, do you know what drugs are? Drugs are a bit unwise. And where's he getting them from? And who's supplying him? And is it a crime? And is it really healthy? Some of this stuff, and he's talking about using psychedelic drugs to medicalize or to treat his own mental health. And you go, well, hang on, mate. Which doctor advised you on this? Or is it just you've decided to self-medicate, which isn't really the wisest way of going about it. There's so much stuff in this which I'm left at the end of it, Shirley, saying at the end of this book that there needs to be another book, because there's so much stuff that's unexplained. Or that is this the stuff that got cut out, the 400 pages he cut, Russell, or is this just stuff I heard one person say he was myopic, he's short-sighted, he can only see here. And is that one of the problems? He just can't see far enough to see some of the issues.
Listen, I mean, I think first and foremost, your wish might come true, because Harry has said in the last few days that he had to cut the book in half, that there is another book in the offering. But I mean, I think that's pretty much tantamount to blackmail. The fact that he's saying that he wants his family to come forward, they haven't had any cause to make an effort to reconcile with him. And what did he say? He says, well, I might have more in my locker, even though he's spent the last few weeks completely trashing them all. There is not a lot of introspection at all from Harry. I mean, whether you're talking about drugs, whether it's talking in the TV interviews, I really did think they would say, both him and Meghan and him in the book, listen, we all made mistakes. We all said things we didn't mean in the heat of battle almost. And if we had our time again, we probably would have ended up at the same spot we are now, but we would have done things a little differently. Not one iota of that sort of explanation of his own behaviour. And I think that's pretty troubling, that it's his way or the highway. He's the one who's right. He's the one who's leading this white knight crusade through the royal family, trying to save it from itself. But it isn't like that. There is one side of the story that we're being told. And I think that the royal family will probably let the dust settle a little bit before people start talking. Whether that is publicly, I very much doubt it. But I'm sure we'll start hearing things across the next few months.
Now, we're going to wrap up in a little bit, everybody. So those of you who've joined us more recently, if you want to ask any questions of me or the royal correspondent Russell, then get into the comments and let us know. What do you think about Harry, his use of drugs? The way what he's doing for the family, is it going to work? Is he going to fix the royal family? Is this going to achieve what he wants it to do? And can we really blame Meghan? If she's married to the man who is arguably quite unwell, then surely she should be praised. And also we should realise that this isn't all down to her. Let's face it. Now, Harry does sort of tend to blame the press for absolutely everything in his book. I was waiting for the point where he would stub his toe and blame a photographer for it. It was that bad. Everything was the press's fault. He never talks about the times he had good publicity. He never talks about the praise he had for the Invictus Games and things like this. And he likens even the press to the Taliban, because the Taliban rode motorbikes in Afghanistan and the Paps rode motorbikes in London. But he gets to blow the Taliban up, as a member of the press. That's a little unsettling. We can understand why he has a problem, and things don't always go his way, but sometimes it has gone his way. And he seems to lack that sort of perspective to see. He talks about how the royal family is frightened of the media and that they need them in order to they think they need to justify their existence. But let's be honest, if we didn't have this national soap opera with the Queen or Prince Margaret or Diana or anybody else or Harry, would the royal family be remotely relevant to any of us if we couldn't identify our own dysfunctions and families with them and see, we've had a divorce or we've had a difficult daughter-in-law or whatever it might be? They wouldn't be relevant if we didn't have this kind of national entertainment out of it, in a way. Does Harry want the royal family to end? Because he wants that relationship with the press to break, doesn't he?
Well, he talked at he's asked by Tom Brabby. When I think it was at one of the TV interviews recently. There've been so many recently. But do you still believe in a monarchy? And he says, yes, I do, which is very hard to see because he's just spent the last few weeks absolutely giving them a grilling, talking about the fact that his brother's children. I keep coming back to this, but I think it's quite a really serious point that he almost not only wants to change it now, he wants to change the future, and again sees himself as some sort of crusader for his brother's children, talking about how one of Charlotte, George, or Louis will end up being the spare as he was, and then kind of saying that they'll pretty much have a mental breakdown like he had. Listen, there are so many issues with Harry. Does he want to wreck the institution? It does seem like that because of everything that he said and the way he has gone about it. Again, I think you can look at the accusations of greed that are now being levelled at him. He's taken an awful lot of money to do all of this over the last few years, and it's all becoming a bit unsavoury. So I think they will hope that he just sort of disappears into the background for a bit. They can get on with getting back on track and try and bring it all together.
Yeah, he needs that money to exist. Because
definitely, yeah.
he doesn't have any other way of existing. He's got enormous security costs and worries and concerns.
Well, he did have I do get this point, but he does have an awful lot of money. I mean, the Queen Mother left him an awful lot of money, his mother's estate. I mean, rumoured he had about 25 to 30 million pounds in his own bank account. So he's not living on the breadline. So you could say by doing everything that he's done, Oprah, all the other TV interviews, Netflix, Spotify contracts for Meghan and whatever, they are raking it in. And at some point, they've got to be pulled up and to kind of say enough now, because it's all a little bit unsavoury.
Yeah. Now, Abby Shell, or is it Abby's Hell? Who knows? Says he needs to be, I think she's from Australia, he needs to be severed from the royal family. Gosh, that's harsh. Charles can always leave the door open as his father, but the monarchy, the UK, public and Commonwealth need to take precedent. This is the issue, Abby. This is the entire thing. It's a family that is also a constitutional organisation, if you like, and the needs of the one are constantly pulling against the needs of the other. Is it fair and reasonable to do this? Now, Harry would probably say he doesn't want to destroy the royal family, but he wants to shake it up a bit. But let's just see what would happen if Harry got everything he wanted. Okay, there's no more cooperation with the media whatsoever. They not that they cooperate much in my experience anyway, but they just don't deal with the media whatsoever under any circumstances, right? But they have to correct every single royal story that there is. So they do have to say every time there's a little tiny thing, they've got to correct every single tiny issue. They've got to be aware of, royals looking at social media comments and worrying about that and deleting them and catering for that. They have to carry on. They have to treat every single member of the royal family as equal. All the children matter just as much in terms of the monarchy and the institution. So that means you don't really have a king or a queen who's a king or a queen anymore. You've always got 3 or 4 kings or queens who have equal status in the hierarchy. That doesn't make any sense. Or do you just have one monarch whose job is to be monarch and the spare is allowed to go off and do all these issues all around the world? Because then what's the monarch left to do? Just to sit there, wear a crown? I mean, we can do it, but it's not particularly stressful, is it? I don't know what Harry's end game is in terms of whether what he wants is even, if he wants it to be better for Louis and Charlotte, how can it possibly get better for them if you still have that institution? Because you've still got what Abby was talking about there, the constitutional pull, the fact that Commonwealth has to come before family and the monarchy. You still have the fact that one of them is going to have the grandeur and the big house and the money and the crown, and the other two are going to be reliant on them for funding. And how many of us are on great terms with our siblings that they would actually keep giving us millions every year? Not an awful lot, probably. I don't think that would really happen.
I think he wants him on bended knee to apologise to him, and that's from his father right down to his brother and who else has offended him over his livelihood, life.
Yeah,
but listen, I mean, I think what does Harry want? What is his end game? I mean, he's made an awful lot of money by doing the one thing that he knows how to do, which is talk about his life and the royal family. So where does it end? I mean, I cannot imagine him going to the coronation. I think that there may be some form of discussions with him, because I think the family will be worried for him. I mean, he doesn't talk like a a well man, put it that way. They're talking about his obsessive behaviour, the things that are eating him up, talking about the fact that he's very, very happy with his new life in California. Sometimes it doesn't always appear like that. And I'm sure moving to a foreign country almost forcibly and not being able to come back to Britain, as he said that he does miss, must be grating on him. So I think he will want the reconciliation, but I'm not too sure the family will want it
I think
now.
He wants a reconciliation with this ideal family of his, and he doesn't
which doesn't exist in any parallel universe at all. It just, that will not exist. They feel as though they've got a job to do. I think the last comment was about the UK, the Commonwealth, and the realms. That needs to be protected at all costs. You talk about the Queen's duty before everything. Well, that still has to reign through, and that unfortunately it's not going to be how Harry wants it.
No, and as everyone knows, recollections can vary, especially if you're taking mushrooms. Now, one thing we just need to quickly talk about, there's been reported that, for example, when Meghan met Kate, she tried to hug her and she sort of recoiled a bit and didn't like it. But it says in the book that when she met welcome travelling soap 44 minutes late to the party, it's reported that when she met William for the first time and Kate wasn't there, it's the first meeting, she just Meghan reached forward and hugged him, and he recoiled, and he just seemed to dislike her, probably on what Jeremy Clarkson might call a cellular level. Everything about Meghan he was concerned about, especially the speed with which his brother had fallen for her. And I think perhaps, he fell very quickly for Chelsea. He fell very quickly for Cressida Bonus, according to this book, and very quickly for Meghan as well, and then decided Meghan was perfect. He's got this idea, because his mother died when he was 12, perhaps, that his mother is now perfect, okay? And he's met a woman who is perfect, and she's already famous, so she won't mind the paps, kind of thing. And he's got this issue with his dad, who's not enough of the dad that he wants, this sort of rough and tough army dad. He's not that guy, and he's in a strange institution. He's Diana's son, right? So he's her brain thought a different way to start with, so he's a bit screwy to start with in the way he's thinking. He's more screwy because of that family that he was raised in, and not really having quite the fatherhood and the childhood that he should have had because of the way his mother died and the fact that he lost her so early. Then he's got this media attention, which has followed him his whole life, and at one point in his life he didn't seem too bothered about it, and then he's become more obsessive. He's a deeply unwell man. But why don't we as a nation treat him perhaps a little bit more as we would have done Diana, or perhaps a little bit more as we would do any other veteran who's plainly got PTSD. He's got panic attacks, nightmares, depression, flashbacks. He's self-medicating. There's a section in the book where a leopard crosses his path in Botswana and he thinks it's his dead mum. I mean, it's astonishing, some of this stuff. He doesn't see any problem with some of these things, but I mean, why don't we, as a nation, I'm not just talking about the president, but us as Britain, why don't we just look at this guy and go, poor bloke?
Well, I think a lot of people will celebrate Harry for being brave enough for speaking out like this, regardless of the money, regardless of the issues with his family, which are increasing by the day, it seems. The fact that he's been able to put his thoughts down, as he says, get his truth out there, sick and tired of all the things that have been written about him over the last 38 years. Why on earth wouldn't he do it, given the opportunity? So I do think it will be a cathartic process for him. One hopes he finds a solace in this process, because, as I say, he does feel, to me, like a particularly unhappy soul, and that's not nice for anybody, is it? We want the family to be able to get along. I do think there will be some reconciliation on the horizon. I do think the family will be worried for him. I think there will be some introspection from their point of view to say, we did fail him, as Charles said himself during one of their dinner meetings. I should have got you the help that you needed. Harry, to his credit, says it wasn't your fault, Pa. So hopefully, in the future, there will be a bit of a coming together and stop the mudslinging, I suppose.
Well, I'll have to see. Now, Caroline, sorry if I've got the pronunciation wrong. His book was intended to upset people who he believes has wronged him. It's quite malicious, really. Basically, it's a form of trolling his enemies via his written words and verbal accounts. Harry might say he's just getting his own back. How many words have been written about him over the years? billions, trillions. And how many words has he written here? 500 pages. He would say this is merely one punch in a huge battering that he's had. Pammy says his childhood trauma is very prevalent. He hasn't felt or heard growing up, and this is his way of seeking validation, clearly. But one of the things we've got very quickly before we move on to our quiz, we've got a little quiz coming up at the end for Russell to test his knowledge. But we want to talk about, because obviously it's really deficient, we want to talk about the fallout and what's going to come next. So Nicola McLean's in the paper today talking about a night on tequila shots she had with Harry and her husband, but that's mentioned a bit more lower down. This is what's going to happen next, isn't it? Because he's lifted the lid off, Russell. All the people who feel that they've got something to add, who may well have just not mentioned it previously because you don't talk about your friendship with the royals, and now have no reason to keep their mouths shut, do they? What's next? Are we going to hear from his dealer?
Well, you might do. You might well find people coming out the woodwork who have felt that the pressure had been on them to not ever speak about his affairs. But the fact that, I mean, all his friends, all the associates from years gone by will be questioning their relationship with him, won't they? I mean, as you say, what is next? We've already heard from a woman who shared a kiss with him talking about sleeping with someone, losing his virginity behind the bike sheds, but it was behind a pub, wasn't it, on a grassy verge? But the detail is absolutely incredible. So there will be a lot of people questioning their relationship, and probably some thinking about what they can get out of the situation as well. So it's not going to go away anytime soon, is it?
No, I think this is going to follow him for his whole life, and it's a case of how he's going to have to come to terms with it. He's either going to have to go and live in a cave and be a hermit, but if he's moving to California, I'm sure that's where he may be happier, and he's apart from his family, and he's got his own media operation that's not linked to the palace or dependent on his dad. He's got his financial independence, and all that may be great, and his wife is near her mum and so on, and he's growing up, the children growing up in a nice $14 million estate, but he's in the land of the free, where the paps and the press have the right of the constitution behind them to do whatever the hell they like. And, you know, it's actually a bit worse from a media perspective in the States than it is here. So perhaps not the best place to avoid paparazzi, and he's certainly getting papped while he's there. But I think it's a case of him achieving happiness. And I think everybody, whether you like Harry or not, whether you like Meghan or approve of what he's done or not, everybody just wishes him the best. We actually want him to be happy. And I think most people who report on him have said that over the years, Russell. They just, you and your colleagues in the Royal Court Corps, who he hates so much, everybody just actually feels quite sorry for some of these people, and they just want them to, if this is how he's going to be happy, go and be happy.
I think that, you know, a lot of people have been doing this job a lot longer than I. Talk about famously when Harry was fantastic to be around, loved being around the press. I mean, he would come down, have a beer with them, laugh and a joke. I mean, going on royal tours can be quite arduous.
I know journalists he's been on benders with, for goodness sake.
Listen, I mean, he was just, he seemed a lot happier. And at some stage, it's grated with him that he hasn't been able to deal with it anymore. So I would just conclude by saying I do find some of the issues in his book troubling, and you just wish him the best, because it's never nice to see someone admitting to struggling, and I think that's what he has articulated in the book.
Yeah, hopefully he will find some peace. I think is the important thing. Right, thank you everyone for taking part. Thank you for all your comments and questions. If you've got any more you want us to wrap on, then leave them in the comments, and we'll try and get to them at the end. But first off, we've got a bit of a quiz, because I want to test Russell's knowledge. It's very short. So we'll start off with an easy one for you. What was Harry's nickname, and how did he get it?
It's Harold, and I forget how he got it. You can enlighten me.
You're looking for I'm looking for a different answer. His nickname, which he got in Botswana, was Spike.
Oh yes, okay.
Can you tell us how he got the nickname?
No, I can't. No. I do remember reading this bit though. I remember reading this bit in the Spanish translation.
Yeah, so it was probably El Spico or something. But no, he got it, I think because his hair was sticking up or something like that. He had very thick hair at the time. I think the way it had grown back after it got shaved at Eton by accident, and then he went to Botswana and it grew back a bit spiky, and so he got nicknamed Spike. Now, so what was the name of the bodyguard who saved Harry from a hand grenade?
Oh, gosh. Mark.
Threw himself on top of it.
Mark.
Billy the Rock. 0 out of 2 so far. 0 out of 2 from the royal correspondent. Now, who bowed to Harry when he went to Afghanistan as a soldier?
His brother.
Incorrect. Gurkhas.
Oh right, yeah, no,
He was
his brother saluting him at Sandringham, isn't it?
Yeah,
this is a disaster, Susie.
This is really bad so far. I want your job. So when he was in Afghanistan, he was a forward operating base. There were Gurkhas there. They all called him Saab, and they bowed to him whenever he crossed the compound. Now, maybe you can get this one. What alcoholic drink does Harry not like?
Pass.
He's about drinking gin and tonic, tequila, everything. He hates beer. He doesn't.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I'm sure I've seen him drinking a beer before, so I don't know why he hates beer.
This may be one of the recollections, may vary.
Yeah, I think so. I think this is one of those issues. In the book.
Right. So 4 questions. The 5th one, the last one, Russell. Can you try
to get this one right? Good Lord. I mean, they are pretty left field, these questions.
Try and pull it back a bit. Now, who or what did Prince Harry refer to as very scary malware?
Malware?
Malware. He was talking about computers and
about computer malware.
Programmed
Twitter.
Sorry?
Twitter, social media.
No, the royal family.
There we go. So 0 out of 5 on the most bizarre questions known to man. But there don't play this to the boss. I'll never live it down.
So I think we've proved Harry's point that royal correspondents just...
They don't know anything, of course. Exactly.
They don't know what they're doing. 0 out of 5. Even I'm surprised by that one, Russell. That's astonishing. Well done. Top marks. Right. Thank you, everyone, for taking part. I don't think we've got any questions to wrap on. During this talk, by the way, we've been trending on YouTube. We have been, we've got 6 times the viewers we started with. Welcome, everybody. If you want to catch up later on, you can replay this from the beginning if you came in late. You can listen to us on a podcast if you've got something else to do, if you look at Spotify or iTunes. And you can join us next Monday for another proper edition of the news agenda, where we'll be talking about the big stories of the day and explaining what's really going on with them with a special guest. Not sure who it is next Monday, but it'll be another one of our staff, and you can come in and join us on this channel then. So if you haven't seen us before, come back on Mondays and Wednesdays, 9 a.m. We're always here. Thank you, Russell, for taking part. Go and read the book again and take some notes next time.
Yeah, no, I don't think I want to be honest. It's been a bruising experience like the family, I imagine.
Thank you for taking us through all that. Crikey, it's gone on for an hour. We will see you all again later on at some time, I'm sure. And I expect we'll see Prince Harry as well, because he's bound to make another appearance on this show. Thanks, everybody. Tatty bye.
Take care.